Now both the Sennheiser PXC 552s and Sennheiser Momentum 3s are overdue for an upgrade. These things were released in the fall of 2019. But still, these headphones sound really good and I really like them for very specific reasons. Nonetheless, today we're going to compare Sennheiser's headphones to the Sony WH-1000XM5s. Maybe you're thinking about upgrading, or maybe you're looking for a really solid deal. Regarding pricing, the PXC 552s have a retail price of $350. However, you can easily find them on sale for $265 these days, and I've even seen them go on sale for less than $200 on major shopping holidays. Then there are the Momentum 3s, which have a retail price of $400, but you can find them on sale for $250, which is insane. And finally, there are the 1000XM5s, which have a retail price of $400. Now, like I mentioned earlier, both of Sennheiser's headphones are pretty old, and I feel that both of their successors are right around the corner. Nonetheless, if you want to pick any of these headphones up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to further support the channel, check out the merch shelf down below. I've made some shirts and hoodies that look and feel great, and if you've been watching me for a while, you know I can be very particular, so I'll only set my name on something that I'm really proud of. Now first, let's talk about the carrying cases here, and this is pretty funny because we've got very different cases here. Since the PXC 552s have a fully collapsible design, they have the smallest case here, which is great for traveling. However, the PXC 552's case isn't completely hard shell. You can still squeeze this case. So if you plan on traveling with the PXC 552s, then you are going to have to be mindful of them. But then there are the XM5s. Since these headphones have a lay-flat design, their case has a larger footprint than the PXC 552's case and their predecessor's case as well. So traveling with this case can be a hassle, especially if you're used to traveling with their predecessor's case. But the XM5's case doesn't compress as much as the PXC 552's case because it's much sturdier. But finally, there are the Momentum 3s. Since these headphones can only be folded, they've got a very big case as well. And to be frank, this case isn't really going to do much to protect your headphones from being crushed if you throw them into a cramped backpack. And in general, the Momentum 3s aren't a great pair of headphones to travel with. Nonetheless, both of Sennheiser's cases feel very premium, and ultimately I still prefer to travel with the PXC 552s over the XM5s. But I just hope that the successors to the PXC 552s will come included with a proper hardshell case. But with the cases out of the way, let's focus on the headphones themselves. Now, the Momentum 3s are using the most premium materials here. We've got new plastic on the ear cups, we've got stainless steel arms on the headband, and we've got sheepskin leather on both the headband and ear pads. Overall, the Momentum 3s feel very premium and they feel very sturdy while in your hands. But then there are the PXC 552s, which have a mostly plastic body, and they're using leatherette on both their headband and ear pads. Now, it's not that the PXC 552s don't feel premium, they just feel different. And when we discuss fit, you'll see the advantages that the material choices on the PXC 552s have when it comes to comfort. But then there are the XM5s, which also have a mostly plastic body and are also using leatherette on their ear pads and headband. However, the XM5s are using recycled plastic, whereas the PXC 552s are using new plastic. And simply put, recycled plastic just doesn't feel as premium as new plastic. Plus, the PXC 552s do have some soft touch surfaces to them, which helps these headphones feel more premium. However, where the XM5s do come out on top over the PXC 552s is its new leatherette. The new leatherette on the XM5s feels sort of like silicone, but with less friction to it. I think it feels nice, and it definitely feels better than the leatherette found on the PXC 552s, which do feel rather plasticky. But then there's the sheepskin leather on the Momentum 3s, which simply feels amazing. It's soft, supple, and there's a very nice grain to it. So overall, one of the selling points of the Momentum 3s is its more premium feeling build quality. However, the use of the more premium materials on the Momentum 3s does mean that they are a little heavier than your average pair of ANC headphones, because the Momentum 3s weigh in at 308 grams. Not bad, but for comparison's sake, the Bose NC700s weigh in at 274 grams. Overall, with the Momentum 3s, they aren't too noticeable when they're on your head, but you never really forget that you have them on. But then there are the XM5s, and these headphones weigh in at 250 grams, 4 grams less than their predecessors, and I would categorize these as lightweight ANC headphones. But finally, there are the PXC 552s, and these headphones weigh in at 230 grams, and I would categorize these as ultra lightweight. And with the PXC 552s, you barely notice them while they're on your head, and in general, the PXC 552s are a pair of very comfortable headphones. Even though all of these headphones are big head approved, the PXC 552s have the least amount of clamping force here, whereas the XM5s have the firmest fit here. And what really makes these headphones stand out are their huge ear pads. These ear pads are going to have no problem accommodating very large ears or ears that stick out a lot. Now, the ear pads on the Momentum 3s are also fairly spacious, and they should also accommodate most ear types, but they're nowhere near as spacious as the PXC 552s. And finally, there are the ear pads on the XM5s. Now, even though these ear pads have a very large diameter to them, they're very shallow. They're more shallow than the Momentum 3's ear pads and way shallower than the PXC 552s. So, with the XM5s, these ear pads do like to press down on my average sized ears, which does get uncomfortable after a while. So if you have large ears or ears that stick out a lot, the XM5s might not be the best option for you. But ear pads aside, another issue with the XM5s is their headband. Since the XM5s have a very thin and minimally padded headband, I found that after 45 minutes, this headband likes to create a hotspot on the top of my head. So at the 45-minute mark, I just gotta take these headphones off. Now, the headband on the Momentum 3s also has very little padding to it, but since it has a lot more surface area to distribute any pressure, this headband doesn't create a hotspot on the top of my head. But finally, there's the PXC 552's headband, and this headband has a whole lot of padding to it. So this headband also doesn't create a hotspot on the top of your head. And in general, the PXC 552s are just a pair of super comfortable headphones. They're super lightweight, they have super spacious ear pads, they have very little clamping force, and their ear pads stay cool for a very long time. The only drawback with the PXC 552s is that they are a little small. With these headphones, I gotta extend their headband all the way out, whereas with most other headphones, halfway or 3/4 is enough. But now let's talk about tech specs, and this is an area where the XM5s clearly come out on top. Now when it comes to battery life, the XM5s have an advertised battery life of 30 hours with their active noise cancellation turned on. And in general, this is a little above average. Whereas the PXC 552s have an advertised battery life of 20 hours and the Momentum 3s have an advertised battery life of 17 hours. Now a battery life of 20 hours and 17 hours is doable, but I'm going to need the successors for these headphones to pump up those numbers. These are rookie numbers. And when it comes to charging these headphones, both the XM5s and Momentum 3s charge via a USB-C port as they should. Whereas with the PXC 552s, one of their main drawbacks is that these headphones charge via a micro USB port. And I feel that for 2022, this is a major drawback. It was a big drawback in 2019, but now it's an even bigger drawback. Now when it comes to Bluetooth connectivity, all of these headphones can be connected to 2 devices at the same time, which is great if you're a power user. However, if you want to use this feature on the XM5s, then you are going to have to sacrifice LDAC. Now if you're an iPhone user, this doesn't really matter because iPhones top out at AAC, and even if you're an Android user, AAC is going to be perfectly fine if you're simply streaming your music. But when it comes to overall performance, all of these headphones have zero latency across the board when watching movies or videos on your phone, whether you're using an iPhone or an Android device. But when it comes to audio codecs, both of Sennheiser's headphones have support for SBC, AAC, aptX, and aptX low latency. Unfortunately, neither of these two Sennheiser headphones have support for any newer versions of aptX like aptX Adaptive, because these headphones are almost 3 years old now. But then there are the XM5s, which have support for SBC, AAC, and Sony's own LDAC, which is their own in-house high-res audio codec. The XM5s don't have any aptX support because Sony has been phasing out aptX on their headphones in favor for their own LDAC. However, like I mentioned earlier, if you want to take advantage of LDAC on the XM5s, then these headphones will only be able to be connected to 1 device at a time, and you do have to be an Android user. And even if you want to take advantage of aptX aptX on either of Sennheiser's headphones, then you have to be an Android user as well. But if you want to, you can always just use a wired connection with any of these headphones because they all still have an audio jack. The only thing that you gotta keep in mind here is that the XM5s are using a 3.5mm audio jack, whereas both of Sennheiser's headphones are using a 2.5mm audio jack. But the really neat thing to also keep in mind here is that with the Momentum 3s, you can use their USB-C port as a wired connection, whereas with the XM5s, you can't. But now let's talk about listening to music with these headphones. Now, I've always said in the past that Sony's headphones are people pleasers because they sound good enough, and if you want, you can crank up the bass on either the XM4s or XM3s and you will be able to physically feel the bass. And this is just what some people want from their headphones. However, with the XM5s, these headphones don't have as much physicality in their bass as their predecessors. So these headphones aren't going to rattle your head as much. However, what the XM5s do have going for them is that they have better instrument separation than their predecessors, and as a result, they sound a little more open. However, the instrument separation on the XM5s isn't a huge difference from the XM4s and XM3s, and the XM5s don't sound as open as either the PXC 552s or Momentum 3s. Now personally, I like my PXC 552s while their bass is set to rumble and with their spatial adjustment set to near. With these settings, the PXC 552s sound very similar to the AirPod Max, and they have a little more physicality in their bass than the XM5s. But then there are the Momentum 3s, which are on a whole other level. Now, as a disclaimer, these have been my favorite sounding ANC headphones for the last 2 years. To me, these headphones have amazing instrument separation, and they have a very balanced sound signature, where the mids are very well pronounced, but without getting overly bright, like with the AirPod Max. And they have a good amount of physicality in their bass, which comes in when it has to. But the thing about the Momentum 3s is that if you want, you can always crank up the bass on them and they're going to rattle your head a good amount while still sounding very open. However, if you do this, then you might want to crank up the mids so that the vocals don't get overpowered by the bass. Overall, from a performance standpoint, the Momentum 3s are the best sounding headphones here because they have the best instrument separation here, and the instrumentals are much more pronounced and detailed with these headphones than with the XM5s. And unlike with both the PXC 552s or XM5s, if you want, you can get these headphones to physically rattle your head much more than these other two headphones, which is going to add another dimension to your music. Now, when it comes to controlling your music, both the XM5s and PXC 552s are using a touchpad, and both of these touchpads are very accurate and they're very easy to use. And what I like about both of these touchpads is that they're both fairly easy to use when it comes to quickly cranking up or cranking down the volume. But if you don't want to have to deal with touchpads on your headphones, then the Momentum 3s are using physical buttons. Now, these buttons are fine and they have a satisfying click to them, but I've always wished that they were metal. But something that all of these headphones do have is that they all have wear sensors. So whenever you take any of these headphones off, they're going to automatically pause your music, and then when you put them back on, they'll start playing your music again. Now, personally, I don't really care for wear sensors on any of my headphones, so I usually just turn that feature off, but they're there if you want them. But now let's talk about the active noise cancellation on these headphones. Simply put, this is an area where neither of Sennheiser's headphones can compete with the XM5s, but I think that's okay, given that these headphones are almost 3 years old and the XM5s are now the kings of ANC again. But so that you can see for yourself, we're going to jump into an ANC test. So, like you may have just seen, neither of the Sennheiser's headphones block out as much noise as the XM5's. The ANC on the Momentum 3s performs more like the ANC that you'll find on a pair of mid-tier ANC headphones, like let's say the Sony XB910N, and even though the PXC 552s do block out more noise than the Momentum 3s, they still don't block out anywhere near as much road noise as the XM5s and especially chatter. However, the thing that Sennheiser's headphones do have going for them is that they have very little cabin pressure, whereas the cabin pressure on the XM5s is a lot more noticeable. And if you're sensitive to cabin pressure, then you might want to be cautious of the XM5s. But overall, the ANC on the XM5s is on a whole other level when compared to these almost 3-year-old headphones. Now, when it comes to the ambient mode on these headphones, the XM5s have a very natural sounding ambient mode, whereas the ambient mode on the Momentum 3s does sound a little artificial. But more importantly, with the XM5s, you can adjust the ambient mode to your liking, whereas with the ambient mode on the Momentum 3s, you can't. But at least the Momentum 3s have a proper ambient mode where you can still be aware of your surroundings while you're listening to your content, because the PXC 552s don't do this. Instead, the PXC 552s have a conversation mode where they will quickly lower the volume of your music and pump in all of the ambient sound around you so that you can quickly talk to someone without having to take your headphones off like this. And when you double tap, they'll go back to normal again. Now, you can also set the Momentum 3s to do this, but you won't be able to play music at the same time. And the XM5s have a similar feature to this called Quick Attention. And then when you let go of the touchpad, they'll go back to normal again. Now overall, the XM5s have the better ambient mode here because it sounds better, and you also have quick attention. Whereas with the PXC 552s, you only have their conversation mode, and with the Momentum 3s, you gotta pick one or the other, but not both. But also, the XM5s have speak to chat, which works a little like this. Hello there. So this is speak to chat. Basically, when I start talking, these headphones will automatically lower the volume of your music and pump in all of the ambient sound around you so that you can quickly talk to someone without having to touch the headphones themselves. Now, these headphones will stay in this state for a preset determined amount of time, which you can adjust through the app, or you can cancel speak to chat by double tapping on the touchpad like this. But personally, I'm not a really big fan of speak to chat because it's very easy to accidentally activate it. If you're talking to yourself very quietly, that's going to activate it. If you're singing along to your music, that's definitely going to activate it. If you start laughing, that's going to activate it. And on rare occasions, if there's a loud enough outside noise, then that's going to activate it as well. So that's why I don't use this feature. But finally, here's the microphone test. Now, I feel that all of these headphones have decent enough sounding microphones to take phone calls with while in a quieter environment, but I do feel that the PXC 552s have a better sounding microphone than the microphone found on the Momentum 3. With the Sennheiser PXC 552s, I can't help but feel that my voice does sound a little clearer. But overall, I would try to take phone calls in a quieter environment with both of Sennheiser's headphones because they don't really do the best job of blocking out any ambient noise. And finally, here are the XM5s. After 5 generations, Sony finally has a usable microphone on their headphones for phone calls. The only thing that I do want to point out here is that there is some slight hissing in the background, even while in a quiet room. But what's really impressive is the amount of noise pollution the XM5s are able to block out. Because if we were to switch over to my lapel microphone, we're going to clearly hear all of this road noise. But if we were to switch back over to the XM5s, it is severely reduced and my voice still sounds really good. Because even though with the PXC 552s, my voice still sounds okay, you can still hear a lot of road noise in the background. And it's the same story when it comes to blocking out road noise. You can still hear a lot of road noise in the background. And it's the same story again when it comes to blocking out chatter. You can still hear a lot of chatter in the background with the Momentum 3. And you can also hear a lot of chatter in the background with the PXC 552s. But then there are the XM5s, which again are doing a really good job of blocking out this ambient noise pollution. Because if we were to switch over to my lapel microphone, you're going to clearly hear all of this chatter. But if we were to switch back over to the XM5s, it is severely reduced. So after 5 generations, Sony finally has a usable microphone on their headphones for phone calls. And I am going to have to say that performance-wise, the XM5s do have the best-sounding microphone here. But with all that being said, the XM5s are clearly the superior headphones here when it comes to active noise cancellation, ambient mode, microphone for phone calls, and battery life. However, for me, the XM5s really fall short when it comes to comfort because of their minimally padded headband that does like to create hotspots, and their shallow ear pads that like to press down even on average size ears. And then there's their case. If you're used to traveling with their predecessors, then this new case is a noticeable hassle. Now, even though Sennheiser's headphones are almost 3 years old now, they still have their standout characteristics. The PXC 552s are a pair of very comfortable ANC headphones to wear. They're very lightweight, their ear pads are super spacious, and their ear pads stay cool for a very long time. And these headphones continue to sound great. But then there are the Momentum 3s, which sound even better thanks to their improved instrument separation and more physicality in their bass. Overall, I still have a sweet spot for Sennheiser's headphones, but right now, unless you can get a really good deal and you don't mind putting up with some quirks, I would hold off from getting either of these two headphones right now because I feel both of their successors are right around the corner. Sennheiser has been updating all of their earbuds recently, and I feel that their headphones are next. If you made it this far, I guess you enjoyed the video, so hit the like button and get subscribed. If you want to pick any of the products up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to further support the channel, check out the merch. I made some shirts and hoodies that look and feel great. And you know I can be very particular, so I'll only slap my name on something if I'm really proud of it.